Peace and blessings. Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for people to tune in before I get started. I'm just going to give you all a couple of minutes to tune in. And if you can let me know if the audio and the video is fine, I would appreciate it. I'll be right back. Peace to Lance Kelly. Thanks for tuning in. Can you all hear me okay? Let me know if you can hear me okay. I would appreciate it. I just want to make sure the audio and everything is right before I get started. So if you can throw up a 7 and let me know if the audio is fine, I would appreciate it. Okay, so somebody said yes, they can hear me. So let's get right into it. So I saw this very disturbing story in the news about this killing of a brother in Minneapolis. And I'm going to read some excerpts from this story, and then I'm going to provide my commentary real quick. The article is going to be posted in the description box to this video, so you all could check it out for yourself. Check out the article for yourself and judge it for yourself. But I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from this particular article and then go into my commentary. So this is from the Washington Post. It says 4 Minneapolis police officers were fired on Tuesday, authorities said, amid protests and outrage after a viral video showed one of them kneeling on the neck of a handcuffed black man who cried that he could not breathe. Now, if you saw this video, you had to have been disturbed by what you saw. I mean, here you had a brother, and the brother's name is, hold on one second, is George Floyd. So this brother is on the ground. He has his hands cuffed behind his back, and you had this white man with his knee on his brother's neck, and his brother's face is on the concrete. And he's saying over and over, I can't breathe. I mean, and this is just like the Eric Garner situation. You all remember what happened to that brother in New York. A brother choked to death, repeating over and over again he couldn't breathe, and that brother was killed live on the camera. And this brother was like crying out to these police, crying out in pain, you know, saying over and over he couldn't breathe. But this pig, this police officer, kept his knee on his brother's neck to the point where the brother passed out. And from what I understand, blood was coming from his nose, from what this article says. So this brother is suffering. And after this whole thing happened, you know, the police chief took action. He fired the 4 officers who were involved in the situation. So you had this white cop with his knee on his brother's neck while his brother is cuffed. And then you had this Asian cop holding off the crowd. This Asian cop not doing a damn thing to stop this pig from choking his brother to death, basically, by having his knee on his throat, on his neck, so the brother couldn't breathe. But, you know, this whole situation is outrageous, man. And, you know, the fact that this guy was, you know, the person that killed this brother was fired, you know, that's a good first step, obviously, but it's not enough. It's not enough at all. You know, we need to have justice in this situation. And so I'm going to finish reading through this article and then, you know, provide further commentary. Shout out to everybody that's tuning in. So it says, a bystander's video of the incident captured George Floyd telling the officer, I can't breathe, as he's pinned to the ground and as an increasingly distraught crowd of onlookers pleads with the officer to move his knee. So not only do you have his brother saying, I can't breathe, you have people in the crowd telling this police officer, he can't breathe, let him up. And they even tell him that he's not moving right now. Like he was He was at the point where he was unconscious. And this cop still had his knee on his brother's neck. This brother was unarmed. This brother was shackled. And he ain't posed any threat to anybody at that point. He was on the ground, but yet and still this police officer had his knee on his brother's neck as the people were telling him to stop. And then you got this Asian cop participating in this act of oppression by holding back the crowd, by not even taking any action. You know, it seems like a reasonable police officer seeing that kind of stuff would check his partner and tell his partner to hold up, you know, take it easy, get off the man. You know, the man is handcuffed, so you don't have to put your knee on his neck. But instead, this Asian cop stood by there and allowed this to happen. And it's a good thing that, you know, the onlookers took video of this incident occurring. You know, they were at a reasonable distance and they captured this video. Because who knows if these cops were even wearing body cameras. They may have, but I don't know. So it's like up to us, the citizens, to be the watchmen of these police. And it's a shame, like when the police are rogue, when the police are the ones committing the crimes, like who do you call upon in those kind of situations? So there's an investigation going on in this case. And, you know, I'm going to read that part of the article in a second. So the mayor announced this Tuesday, you know, today, that you know, these officers involved have been terminated, and he said it's the right decision for our city, the right decision for our community, it's the right decision for the Minneapolis Police Department. And then, and this is what the police originally said. They said that George Floyd was stopped on a report of forgery. They said that he resisted the police, and you know, there was a confrontation, and that's what led to the arrest. Just bear with me 1 second. And then they decided, you know, the police department decided to have the FBI investigate this particular incident. You know, the mayor said this. He said, for 5 minutes, we watched a white police officer press his knee into the neck of a black man who was helpless. I mean, this brother was completely helpless. He's shackled, his hands are behind his back, he's unarmed, but yet this police officer continues to put his knee on his brother's neck. And, you know, the mayor went on to say, for 5 whole minutes, this was not a matter of a split-second poor decision. That's deliberation. I mean, anytime you had that amount of time pass by where this man is locked, shackled, and can't pose any kind of threat, that is a deliberate act. That's what it is. You know, and this, like, as this article points out, it says that this has come like shortly after the Ahmed Arby situation. You all know I've done a series of videos about that. Also, there's a article about this white woman calling 911 on this brother. I'm going to do another live stream about that shortly after this one. But yeah, let me see if there's anything else I want to add from this particular article. Yeah, so it cites one of the witnesses, and the witness said, when I walked up, he was already on the ground. The cops was pinning him down by his neck, and he was crying, and they wasn't trying to take him serious. You know, and it quotes one of the bystanders. It said they were like saying, you're going to just sit there with your knee on his neck? It says minutes later, the man appeared to be motionless on the ground, his eyes closed, and his head laying against the road. And they were saying, like, he's not even moving. That's what the crowd was trying to tell this police officer. He's not even moving. Get off of his neck. And then one of the people asked, did you kill him? You know, and it says that they put the unconscious man onto a stretcher and into an ambulance. And and people were saying, you know, the police killed him. You know, that's what they were saying. So yeah, later on he went to the, you know, he went to the hospital and he later passed away. And this is just crazy, man. It's crazy that here we are still dealing with this situation of police brutality. I mean, despite all this supposed progress that this society has made, black life still doesn't mean anything today. You know, you had this police officer like killing his brother live on camera in front of all of these people, and the people were basically powerless. There was nothing that they could do about it. All they could do was record it and, you know, voice their opposition to what was going on. And it's like, it's time for us to take action. And I'll get to your comments in a second. It's time for us to take action, man. Not just with these marches and protests and all that kind of stuff. It's time for us to take it to another level, man. It's like we really need to have a more militant type of stance as a people, man. It's time for us as a people to start defending ourselves from these police. It's time for us to start to learn how to use firearms, like, and defend our community from these police that terrorize our community. You know, of course, I believe that we need to exhaust every other avenue, you know, in terms of pursuing justice. You know, it's a good thing that the family has, you know, attorneys, you know, pursuing this case and demanding justice in this case. And that's all well and good. But the problem is, you know, a lot of these attorneys, you know, they may have a genuine interest about, you know, with respect to justice, but what they're doing is not like creating any kind of structural or systemic change. For the most part, all of they're doing is getting money for their clients, you know, money for the family and all that kind of stuff, which is good. The family should be entitled to that. But they're not, you know, they're not doing anything to end this systematic oppression of black people. They're bringing attention to these individual cases around the country, but there needs to be some kind of effort to completely transform these racist institutions called police departments that systematically target and kill black people. We need to have some kind of action taken, you know, some kind of litigation that's comprehensive to deal with these systemic issues instead of just these individual cases. It's like you see the same faces all the time, the same group of attorneys that get on the same media outlets that complain about the same cases of police brutality all around the country, hopping from one case to the next case, collecting money for families. But at the end of the day, you know, nothing is done to change the racist structure that allows these types of things to happen. And it's good, again, that the families get compensated, but we need fundamental change. These police departments need to be transformed completely. Um, and, you know, also we just need to have a more militant type of stance in terms of these protest movements. You know, too often these movements don't operate from a position of strength often. You know, they operate from a position of begging, a position of, you know, begging these people to recognize our humanity. To hell with begging, man. We need to have some strong, courageous organizations like we had back in the 60s with the Black Panther Party. Because enough is enough, man. I mean, how many of these cases are we going to hear about? How many times are we going to hear about another defenseless, unarmed black man being killed by police or vigilantes? Who's going to stand up to these police that brutalize our people, man? How many more people must die? And all we're going to do is run around, get with these hashtags and stuff. That's not enough. A hashtag is not enough. You know, we need something more than a hashtag. We need a movement that's going to bring about change. An uncompromising, bold, courageous movement that's willing to sacrifice everything for freedom, justice, and equality. And, you know, as Malcolm X said, the price of freedom is death. And it's just a shame that here we are again, another brother killed by these police. And I'm sure that the respectability politics type people are going to talk about, well, the brother shouldn't have done this, the brother shouldn't have done that. And I understand that to an extent, but let's stop blaming a victim for the brutal oppression that's inflicted upon us as a people, man. It's time for us to stand up to the oppressor, man. Stand up against them in every single way possibly, in the courtroom, in the streets, in marches, and with arms if necessary. And it's nothing militant or, you know, it's nothing crazy or radical about self-defense. That's human nature. It's human nature to defend yourself. You have a legal right to defend yourself. And it's about time for black people to exercise that right. You have a legal right to bear arms under certain circumstances in this country. And it's time for us to exercise that right. You know, I'm just tired of hearing about all these black people dying at the hands of these police, at the hands of these pigs, man. Just to be blunt, this stuff has to end, and we have to be the ones to end it. It's not going to end with some YouTube video. It's not going to end with some hashtag. It's not going to end with just people marching in some streets and stuff like that. It's going to end when the people are willing to do whatever is necessary to end it. So anyway, man, I just had to share my frustrations, you know, with this whole situation. You know, seeing this brother on the ground just outraged me. I mean, it brought back the images of Eric Garner being choked to death in New York. Choked to death on camera. And to this day, years later, there is no justice for Eric Garner. And I hope that that's not the situation here. But anyway, let me see what you all are saying before I conclude. And, you know, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. And right after this, I'm going to do a live stream about this other situation that happened in Central Park today. Yeah, Covina man said those cops held a Trump rally on that brother's neck. Somebody said, in my opinion, it's time for us to head back to Africa. Um, for me, like, that's not a realistic solution to our situation, man. It's hundreds of, I mean, it's millions of people, tens of millions of African Americans in this country. Um, I don't think that it's feasible for us to be thinking about some mass exodus. And even if we were, you know, I've done videos on this. I encourage people to check out my video that I did called Black Separatism is a Fantasy. Um, you can check that out. If you search for that on here on YouTube, you'll find it. But I don't think escapism is the answer. Instead of running from our problems, we got to confront our problems. Um, you know, this land is just as much our land as it is any other group of people's land. Our ancestors built this country with our blood, sweat, and tears, and we don't have to go anywhere. We have every right to stay here. We have every right to demand justice. We have every right to demand freedom and equality. Um, and not just demand it, we have every right to take it, to seize it. Um, yeah, it's just really frustrating, man, seeing this video and just seeing another one of these cases. Um, but I'm glad, I will say this, it's a good thing that we do have people protesting, because if no one was protesting, if those people didn't capture this on video, then those cops would still be working in that police department, still be out there terrorizing and brutalizing more black people. Um, so it's a good thing, that this was captured on video and that people were protesting and everything. And it's a good thing that they have a black police chief in that department who immediately took action to fire those men from that position. But losing a job, that's one thing, and justice is another. It's time for justice for this brother that was killed by these police. Justice, man. And hopefully, there will be some kind of justice in this case. Um, because if there's no justice in the courts, then people may take to the streets and take action on their own, just like we saw in Ferguson. Um, yeah, so let's see what else you all are saying before I sign off. So Phantom Mute said they did that in broad daylight on camera. And like it's a situation where this brother wasn't even, well, they say he was resisting arrest and all that kind of stuff. That's what they say. Um, but he was completely subdued at that point. Like they had him handcuffed. He was unarmed. So that conduct was inexcusable, man. And it's just that makes me think about this whole point about a few bad apples. Whenever things like this happen, people always say it's just a few bad apples. Well, when the statistics show that, black men in particular are disproportionately targeted for police brutality, that tells me that it's a bigger problem than just a few bad apples. When you have 4 police officers present while this brutality is going on, 3 other police officers present, one of them actually committing this brutality, and none of the 3 other ones take any kind of action to stop this from happening, that tells you that this problem is larger than just a few bad apples. The whole system is rotten to its core, and the system must be completely, fundamentally changed in order to prevent these things from happening. People think that automatically because you appoint some Negro police chief, then automatically that's the end of police brutality. And we've seen time and time again that that's not the case. Time and time again where you have these black police chiefs, but the police under them still inflict police brutality on black communities. We saw it here in Baltimore with Freddie Gray. Even though you got a black police chief, you had that situation. And we see the situation here where you got this black police chief, but this white officer was able to commit this act of brutality against his brother. So, I'm glad that there's going to be an investigation. I'm glad that the FBI is involved, but like, I don't have much confidence in the Justice Department or the FBI because in most of these situations, they tell us how their hands are tied and how it's so difficult to bring these cases and blah, blah, blah. Um, so let me see what else you all are saying before I move on. Let's see. So somebody said, get off the camera and come to Memphis. No more talk. Um, Renaissance Man said 4 officers have been fired. Do you think they'll be charged? Um, I really can't say whether or not they'll be charged, man. I mean, you've seen how these cases have turned out. They may charge them just to calm down the people, and then later on the case get dismissed and stuff like that. I just hope that they conduct a thorough investigation. And in these types of situations, they need to have a special prosecutor, someone that's able to act independently without the constraints that a regular prosecutor has. Because a lot of these regular prosecutors, they rely on the police. You know, they have these strong ties with the police and all that kind of stuff. So they don't really, a lot of times, have the will to press ahead with these types of cases. And then some of them try to politicize these types of cases for their own gain. So we need to have independent special prosecutors in these types of cases. And I don't know if that's the situation here. I haven't had a chance to explore it yet, but that's something that I'm going to look into. So let me see what else you guys are saying. Um, so the bottom line is I don't know if charges are going to be brought. So somebody said all y'all do on YouTube is talk. Yeah, I mean that is what a lot of people do on YouTube, but I don't just talk. Like as many people know, I'm a civil rights attorney. So while these people talk about discrimination every day when I'm at work, I use the law as a tool to fight against oppression, to fight against discrimination. I've been about that life all of my life, all of my adult life, from my days as a student activist at Howard University until today. So I'm not just about talk. I've faced police before. I've confronted police before. Called out police right to their face before. So, I'm about that life. I'm not just, somebody that's sharing opinions on YouTube and stuff. My life is civil rights. My life is human rights. Um, but I understand. And my question to you is like, what are you doing? While you say all people do is talk on YouTube. Um, And let me be clear, like I think that it is important for people to express their views on forums like YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. I think that there is a role for that if it inspires action. You know, not if it's just about monetizing the movement. And that's what a lot of these people are about. They're about monetizing everything, monetizing hashtags, you know, getting paid off of the suffering of our people. These people criticize, some of those traditional civil rights people, but at the end of the day, they're doing exactly what they accuse the old guard of doing, and that's profiteering off of the oppression of black people. Um, and that's not what it should be about. It should be about inspiring real life action in real time to make a difference in our community and in our world. That's what it should be about. Yeah, so Renaissance Man said people need to apply pressure, but we don't need to be rioting in our own neighborhood. That will only hurt the community. Yeah, I agree, that riots don't help community. Like, riots don't help. Like, of course, you can say that a riot is destructive of the community. Like, a lot of times, these riots take place in black communities and result in businesses in black communities being destroyed and stuff like that. And obviously, I don't condone any of that. I don't condone riots or anything like that. Um, but I will say this, unfortunately, as King said, a riot is like the voice of the voiceless. That's when the voiceless are trying to cry out. Like when people feel like the political establishment is not listening to them, when they feel like the criminal justice system is not a venue for them to get justice, when they feel that way, they carry out what people call riots, which are really rebellions. And despite people condemning rebellions and stuff like that, rebellions unfortunately bring attention to issues. If it wasn't for a rebellion here in Baltimore, like nobody would have cared about the plights of people like Freddie Gray and stuff like that. There would have I doubt that there would have been, some Justice Department thorough investigation and a consent decree and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, those types of incidents compel people to act. They compel the government to take some action, unfortunately. But I would hope that that wouldn't be necessary. I would hope that that kind of action wouldn't happen. So let's see. Um, but I agree. I feel what you're saying. Yeah. So as somebody said police think they're Judge Dredd, where they serve as judge, jury, and executioner. Unfortunately, um, it's just a disgrace, man. It's a disgrace that this brother had lost his life under these circumstances. So somebody said, "What do you suggest specifically? Calling for a movement. Let it start with you." Um, yeah, I mean, I just think that there's time for a more militant type of posture, man. Like this posture of begging people to view that our lives matter and stuff like that. That posture of, you know, the cycle that goes on where you have the hashtag, you have the victim, you had attorneys, bring attention to a case and cash out from the case, and the families bought off, and then you had the marches and all that kind of stuff, and no justice, and then that fades from memory, and then we repeat the cycle over again. I mean, you all have heard all this stuff before, man. Something has to change. This begging posture that a lot of us have needs to end. This hashtag mentality needs to end, and it's just time for real action, man. And that action, could come in the form of civil disobedience, um, to the extent where business as usual is disrupted. If there is no justice, I think that we need to try to make sure that there's justice, do everything that we can to use what the legitimate channels for, to carry out our, to express our frustration. But at some point, it's time for the people to take more militant type of action. And a lot of people don't associate the word militant with Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther King took militant action when he was engaging in those acts of nonviolence, when he was, defying the laws to make a point or to express, his outrage about the injustice that exists in society. And you do have movements that are doing stuff like that do engage in acts of civil disobedience. These neat, you know, um, well choreographed civil rights performances need to come to an end. Like these performances where they give you a permit and tell you you got permission to march here, and as Malcolm X said, when the sun goes down, you better be out of town type of deal where you had these performances basically instead of just like real militant, action being taken. So yeah, I mean, I just think that we need to get to the level, man. It's time for us to like escalate this struggle, man. Take it to the next level, um, because the way things are right now is not good enough. Um, but yeah, so I just had to get on here for a second and share my views about this. I will, the article is posted in the description box so that you all could check it out and you could watch the video if you haven't seen it. Um, But I'll be right back in a few minutes with another live stream on this other ridiculous story. Um, man, it's just so incredibly frustrating to see these things happen. But anyway, please rate, comment, subscribe, like the video, share the video, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. Peace and blessings, everyone. I'll be right back in a few minutes.